Hello and welcome to Testify. Tonight is our third virtual show, Not Here, True Tales of Exploring the Negative Space. I'm your host, Angela Maldonado, and I'm excited to bring you these amazing stories to our Testify virtual stage. Now, this is our third show of the sort, and not only are you watching us on our Facebook Live or Facebook page, Testify ATX, you can also watch this show on our Twitch channel and our YouTube channel. So if you're watching from any of those platforms, feel free to say hi and hello to any of us. Support the performers by just giving a comment down below. Now, normally, the show is a $5 cover when we're in our beloved Spider House Ballroom, as you can see from my background. But tonight's performance is free. But if you're able to, please consider donating to some of the following local organizations: Austin Justice Coalition, the Black Bodies Project, or Measure Austin. So usually around this time, I would get into some house rules like, where's the bar? There's some bathroom break sometime. You may get an intermission. But the only house note I have for tonight is to be sure to tip yourself generously. So that is the only kind of rule for tonight. But we're welcome. We want to welcome you to our Testify stage, and I'm glad that you're taking part of your evening to watch us. And like I said, the theme tonight is Not Here, and we've kind of revisited our themes as we've kind of had to stay home and deal with life during a pandemic. So Not Here has come to mean a lot of things for a lot of people. For me, that means that I'm not really sleeping very well. And I think that the biggest kind of shakeup, well, I don't sleep well in general because I love this snooze button too much, but that's another story. But in this particular story, I woke up one morning and the sun was already up and I'd kind of been off and on all night. But I looked to the other side of the bed and I saw my mom laying there. And I could see her perfectly. She was wearing her comfortable pants and her cardigan, and she was just kind of laying in the position that she normally lays on the bed when she's like reading a book. And I stared at her and I thought, this has to be a dream, because if I'm seeing her in my dream, that means one, she couldn't be there because she lives about 3.5 hours away. So if I'm seeing her right next to me, that means she has to be dead. And that means that I'm dreaming. And I'm working all of this out in my mind as I'm kind of like staring at the bed, and I'm thinking, like, is this happening? And I go to that place because my mom usually tells us that whenever someone passes away, they can always come and see you. And usually that happens when you dream. When my father passed away, she said, don't worry, he'll come to you in your dreams, just like, she would tell me stories of other relatives who've come to her. And in that second, I realized this must be it. This must be, her visiting me, because she's no longer 3.5 hours away. And I felt frustrated because I'd been kind of dragging my feet on helping her get a video chat going. She's not the most tech savvy person, and I hadn't seen her face in a few months. Usually I would have gone home. So I drug my feet kind of troubleshooting a way to get us video chatting. And I think I did because sometimes I feel that it's inconvenient because I always seem to be kind of troubleshooting these problems, and you say yourself's too busy, and it's not like I'm not there for her. We still talk on the phone. But I remember waking up from that dream and thinking that it was imperative by the end of this day I needed to take whatever time needed to be done to figure out this problem and be there for her. And I didn't tell her what my dream was, and I didn't tell her that, the urgency of it all. I think she was just kind of surprised that it was happening by the end of the day. And I just realized that taking a few minutes to be for her there in the moment is a lot better than the alternative when she's not even here at all. And so that was, you know, that was the most valuable thing I could do that day. And the storytellers tonight have their own stories about missed opportunities or people not being there or just different moments of not here. And I will not waste any more of your time, and I'll get to the show. And we have a full range of people with some amazing stories. So I want to bring up our first storyteller. His name is Courtney, simply Courtney. He's an improvising musical comic storyteller from Austin, Texas. Simply Courtney recently performed 34 shows in 34 nights to celebrate his 34th birthday in March. Tonight, he shares his story, The Rangers of Ranger.
We can't hear you.
Like it's unmuted. Hey, what's up, man? How y'all doing? I'm simply Courtney, and I was talking about my stories tonight. So I'm going to talk about the Rangers of Ranger, Texas, and so I ended up pretty much good. I ended up when I was in high school. I was a football player. I was trying my best to go. Sorry, I'm scatterbrained right now, but let's knock it out. All right, so as a high school football player, I was trying my best to live up to pretty much the big time life of trying to sign the national letter of intent, and I ended up pretty much just committing to a random school that I had never visited before. In high school, it was one of those experiences where it was kind of boring because I was so ready to leave high school. I felt like I didn't fit in the school that I was in. And because of that, I was always doing that whole looking forward to the next big thing. And to me, the next big thing was going to college. I thought this big college experience was going to be amazing. And instead, what ended up happening is I get to junior college that looks a lot like, I guess I have to say, the projects here in town in Austin. And what was so scary about it is me and my mom had a long conversation before I left for school that I had to cut my hair, I had to stop wearing baggy clothes, and I had to, I guess, rein in my appearance. And so I remember going to this junior college, and I freaking get there, and all the people out there are looking. It looked like I don't know if you people ever seen the Cash Money Millionaire Back That Ass Up video. That's exactly what my dormitory looked like when I showed up day one. So nonetheless, I get there to Ranger, and I stick out like a sore thumb because I'm dressed like prim and proper, like a little wannabe business professional. And I'll never forget, my mom looks over at me and she's like, "Oh, damn, I think I made my son into a nerd. He might get bullied." She legitimately said that to me. My mom looked at me and she didn't apologize, but she might as well have. So I get dropped off. It was one of the things that I am so happy that when I went to Ranger, I just got dropped off. It was the first time I went there, and I just stayed there because if I would have had a chance to take a visit, I literally would have probably visited the school and never came back. But nonetheless, I go to Ranger and I stay there for a semester. I'm playing football, and it's a fun experience because we're traveling around. But I started noticing some things about junior college Rangers is we freaking barely practiced. We didn't work out. We didn't warm up, and it was just one of those things where I could tell they didn't take the whole process seriously. The games were fun. Like we had our games on Fridays and Saturdays. Those were cool, but the practices were subpar, and then even the classes were subpar. And I started noticing, probably after the third week or so of school, that it felt like I was pretty much furloughed, or I was in high school for an extra semester. And I remember just one night, I think I had some of the players that came through. I had made some, good grades on a few assignments, and I guess the word got out that I was good at writing. And I had people come to my dormitory and ask me to write their papers for them. The thing that was messed up is junior college, there's freshmen and there's sophomores. The sophomores are your upperclassmen. I had sophomores coming to me, a first semester freshman, trying to get me to write their papers for them. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, you've been in college almost 2 years, and you need help on your assignment from me? And it was one of the eye-opening experiences just because I had no idea. I guess I don't want to speak on all junior colleges, but I know that definitely for this one here, it seemed like I was in freaking high school all over again because a lot of the same behavior and materialism, people were all like worried about what they were dressed like. Nobody cared about, actual school or practice. Moving forward, one of my, I guess I don't want to say favorite, but it was one of the weirdest occurrences that happened. Was kind of it sealed my fate and let me know I didn't need to be at this school anymore. We had a football game. We went over, so we're in Ranger College, which is I didn't even describe where Ranger is. So the school I went to was the Ranger College, and we were in Ranger, Texas, and our mascot was the Rangers. So we were the Rangers from Ranger. We had a game against a team called Trinity Valley, which is over in Athens, Texas. We went over there and played the game, and by the time the game was over, we had guys that played the game with us. They didn't ride the bus back to school. Instead, they got in the car with their friends, and they went back to our dormitory, and they burglarized a number of dorms. Not mine, thank goodness.
Oh my.
They went and burglarized dorms before we had a chance to get back from the game. So these guys went, burglarized our dorms, got arrested because they tried to go and pawn the stuff. And in the time that it took us to drive all the way back from our game, these guys went, burglarized, tried to pawn, got caught, and got arrested. These dudes were in jail by the time we got back from the game. That was like a huge red flag amongst me. A sea of red is a thing. And so I was just like, yo, this is what these guys are doing during the season. What the hell are they going to do off season? And so I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, I'm supposed to be here because the way junior college works, football, you're supposed to be there for 2 years. And so I was thinking, okay, well, I'll do 2 years and then I'll transfer to school, Texas State, whatever. After seeing people get arrested that had just played a game with me and know that that's how much they didn't care during the season, I had to make a decision to just literally up and leave after the season was over. So I remember, I don't think I called my mom. I think it was one of those things where this may have been one of the first major decisions that I had ever made, I guess, as a young adult. And so I ended up freaking packing up. I remember our season was over, and I was talking to the coach, and I was like, "Hey, man." He's like, "Yeah, you did good. You're probably gonna start next season. It's gonna be great." And I was like, "Yay!" And I was like, "All right, so here's the deal. I'm leaving. I'm transferring." And I left, man. It was weird for me because I remember I was committed and I felt like I was quitting, but I knew that if that's what those guys were doing during the season, outside of the season, who knows what. It was so many things we did. We traveled around. I remember we went to parties and we fight. Every club we went to, no matter how big or small it was, we would get into a freaking fight and get kicked out of the bar. It was one of those things where I, after a while, chose not to go. Like Friday nights or so, we didn't have a game or something. everybody like, we're gonna go to this club, whatever. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And I could tell they were wanting me to go because I was one of the bigger dudes on the team, and they were hoping that I would, you know, get there and fight with them. And I was like, I'm not going to fight because y'all are gonna go to jail. And sure enough, they ended up in jail because they robbed them. So I just that was an interesting thing. I remember my first real adult decision where I knew I didn't belong somewhere. And so I remember thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, I definitely don't belong here. So that's the theme. I hope that story made some kind of sense. Trying to set up, I had two things. You can see the wires from the other show that I was trying to do. I ended up just closing my phone out on them. So I'm pretty sure they're mad at me right now. But real talk, I'd much rather have been with my Testify family than the other show anyways. So we're good. So thank you guys so much. I've been Simply Courtney. This was my story talking about the Rangers of Ranger. And this was my example of not here, zero or negative. Thank you. I don't know if I'm allowed to stop my video or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aw.
Yeah, that's us actually in Colorado. It wasn't all bad. There were some good times we did travel. So that was us in the Colorado hills. So that was cool. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Courtney. Courtney is such an amazing guy. I remember seeing him, I think, and meeting him for the first time when we used to do, I don't know if y'all remember.
Yeah, I did. I gave up on it. Because this one wasn't working.
I think he's still here. I don't know if you remember No Shame out at the Salvage Vanguard, but I think that was when I first met Courtney. He was practicing stand-up. And yes, there's a special place in my heart for the No Shame show at the Salvage Vanguard. But the show here is still going, and our next storyteller tonight is the sweetest person I've met. I mean, I know a lot of sweet people, but he's like one of them. Lottie Laura is a artist, award-winning storyteller, and animal lover. He has taken part in storytelling events for Testify, I'm Driftwood, and The Moth, where he won with a story about sympathetic nausea and what it teaches us about love and connection. He's also a native Texan and currently resides in Austin with his partner. They have two elderly cats who hated each other. Both passed away recently within weeks of each other. And while they couldn't stand each other in real life, they are now side by side on the mantle. Tonight, Lottie comes to our virtual Testify stage with his story, I Am Lottie.
My name is Ladislao Guerra, Lottie for short. But for the entire time that I was in school, I was called Larry. Now, don't call me that. I hate it, and I won't answer to it any longer. I never quite understood how I got to be Larry until I was introduced later in life to an older Latino male. And I introduced myself as Lottie, and he asked me pointedly, "Are you trying to say Larry?" As if I was having trouble pronouncing my own name. He looked shocked when I told him no, I was actually trying to say Lottie, and then I realized that his name was Chuck. And I knew he wasn't really Chuck. He had never been Chuck, but Chuck had been the name that had been thrust upon him like Larry was to me. I can remember in elementary school the horror on each of my teachers' faces when they came across my name on the roll the first day of class. They would just stop and scrunch up their foreheads. And I would raise up my hand and say, "That's me. Please call me Larry," as my parents told me to. They were relieved to have something that they could actually pronounce. But I am not Larry. I never was. In the first grade, I was still learning Spanish at home. The teacher held up large flashcards with pictures on them, and we had to raise our hands if we knew what the picture was. There was a house and a cat and a bunny, and my hand shot up because I knew the answer. It was a conejo, which is Spanish for bunny. The teacher just looked at me and said, "What is it that you said?" Well, I spoke up louder because it was obvious she couldn't hear me. So I said, conejo. The teacher stopped and stared at the class with the picture here and said, this is a bunny, right, class? Well, the whole class chimed in, yes, it's a bunny. And the teacher looked at me and said, now, Larry, we only use real words in this classroom, no made up words. She then looked at the class and said, you know, he still wants to talk like a baby and use up made up words. The class laughed at me, and I knew that I was being noticed and that things were not going well for me. So I began to hide. I did not want to be noticed, and I hid pretty well for the next several years. Now, we had moved from where we originally were in Houston to a white suburb in Houston, and I never understood that we were actually Mexican. I kind of thought we were like everyone else, white. And I remember a kid asking me one day, my mother says you must eat Mexican food all the time. And I said, I think we have regular food. So I went home and asked my mother about it. And she says, well, we do have Mexican food, but for us, it really is just regular food. And I think this was the first time that it dawned on me that we really weren't like everyone else, that there was something inherently different about us. And what when I learned at school, it was something bad. Then in our 5th grade music class, now I love music and I love singing, but it's something I do in my room, not out in public. Even at 10 years old, I knew life was better if you managed to go unnoticed. But this song had a Spanish verse, and I was the only Mexican in my class. So my teacher wanted me to sing the Spanish verse while standing at my desk with the whole class watching. Ugh. This song was about rain. And for those of you who don't know, the word for rain is lluvia. It's spelled L-L-U-V-I-A. The double L's make a Y sound in Spanish. So I sang the first 2 words of the song, which were está lloviendo, and the teacher stopped me immediately and corrected me and told me there's no Y there. There are 2 L's. The sound should be like haul or call. And I explained to her that the sound 2 L's made in Spanish was really a Y sound. Well, my teacher furrowed her brow at me and then scanned the classroom and asked them, can you imagine that? They don't even know how 2 L's are supposed to sound. Then she looked at me and said, why would someone do something like that? As if I am responsible for the entirety of the Spanish language. Don't they know that that's wrong? Well, then she looked at the class and she just started laughing, and the class took their clue.
Oh my God.
They started laughing too at me as I stood there alone at my desk. These are my friends. And if they are laughing at me, then surely I am the one that is wrong. Nowadays, I think I'm considered Latinx or whatever it is now. Now, I've been different things depending on the year. I've been Hispanic. I've been Chicano. I've been Latino. I've been La Raza. Basically, I'm a brown person whose ancestors have been part of the US before it was the US. I am a Native American. At least part of my people were here before the continent was discovered. Even though I'm not fluent in Spanish, I can get by. I have what I call emergency Spanish, also known as grandparent Spanish. But I have to hunt for words or ask for help. You will hear the phrase, como se dice, a lot when I am talking Spanish. That means how you say.
Yes,
And it kind of embarrasses me. Now, when all this was happening in school, my parents did not intervene on my behalf. I don't think they knew how to handle the inequities of school. And Spanish became dangerous for me at that time. So I made an active decision that I was not going to use it except in emergency cases, like a visit with my grandparents. The thing about me is that I understand what it feels like to be bullied and to stand alone. I learned to hide and not be noticed, and I am extremely uncomfortable in large groups. But if you are one of my people, I will stand up for you, even as I won't stand up for myself. I've taken care of bullies for my sister. I took care of my younger sister when my parents tried to bully her to make her live by some archaic Mexican standards that simply didn't work in Houston, Texas in the 70s. And I yelled at my vet for manhandling one of my cats. Then years ago, when Chris and I went to Tijuana, I stood up for him. We were shopping and he found a shirt he wanted to buy. Now, I have come to believe that my face is basically ethnically ambiguous. I've gotten mistaken for Egyptians, for Asians, for Indians, by folks of those specific groups, as well as other fellow Latinos. Well, Chris was looking through the shirts and I heard the vendors talking behind the table. They planned on raising the prices for Chris because it was obvious he was an American. I used to tell Chris that he was so white, he was actually pink. In perfect Spanish, I looked at them and told them, no deben hacer nada de eso. Estoy oyendo a todo. I am listening to everything you say, and you should not be changing the prices. Their eyes bugged out of their head, and they spread the word to the other booths. El chino se habla español. They all thought I was Chinese for some reason. Well, Chris saw the commotion going on behind the table, and he asked me, what is going on? I told him, that shirt is $15. If they charge you more than that, don't buy it. Well, they didn't raise the price on him, and they kept their eyes on me. And I realized that Spanish was never the problem. In fact, when used properly, it's actually a superpower. Now, I myself was never the problem. I was just myself. And while this may have been problematic for some other folks, the problem was theirs. I grew up in a world where I had to be Larry. I felt small and ashamed, but my name is Lottie. And I've decided I don't want to live in Larry's world any longer. That world, wherever it was, that world is no longer my world.
All right. Welcome to my world.
Yes. Well done, buddy.
Oh,
I had hair at one point.
it's amazing. Thank you so much, Lottie. I also
Thank you,
can't do
Angela.
it with baby Lottie. That's just like it's like made my week to see baby Lottie. I mean, other than his amazing story, which I'm sure I hope you all enjoyed. I'm enjoying it, and I hope you're enjoying the night so far. We have more storytellers. Next up, I'm really excited to introduce you to Laura Galan Wells. She's a writer, actor, homeschooling mom of 5 who loves playing with slime. She is currently working on a historical fantasy novel, is in the cast of Escándalo, improvised telenovelas, and recently in a Latino US Census commercial. She is the founder of ATX Stage Diversity, which promotes performers of color. Her pre-COVID hobbies, which I definitely think that's a thing now, include volleyball, parkour, and camping as a volunteer with families in nature. But tonight, she's here on our Testify stage, bringing us her story, Mischievous. Please welcome Laura.
Hello, everybody. So when I was a child, and I am a native Texan, I was not necessarily terribly mischievous, but I do have some stories when I was a little bit naughty, and they mostly involved food. One time, my mom told me not to eat this cheese that she was saving for some kind of occasion, probably cooking it. And I ate the entire round of cheese and got very, very sick. It is my first cheese memory. Another time, actually many, many times, I was a thief of candy. And I would always leave the evidence under my bed because I figured it would be too obvious in the trash can, but she always found it. My mom always found it. One time I ate an entire box of cherry liqueur chocolates. one at a time when I was 8 years old. And my parents never noticed because they each thought the other one had been eating them. In fact, I heard them have a whole discussion about it where they each denied having been the ones that ate it all. Anyhow, so eventually we started traveling, living in different countries. My dad worked for Halliburton, the oil company, and we ended up in Cairo, Egypt. And this was when I was 8, and there was a little apartment complex that we lived in. It only had 4 stories, and we lived on the 3rd floor. And the base apartment had a beautiful garden, lots of flowers, green grass, and there were chameleons that were native there, very cute, and they just would look at you wherever you went. And I desperately wanted to play in this garden. So I had a little friend over, and we just went in there, and all of a sudden, the Boab, which in Cairo is an elderly person who, at least all the ones I ever saw were elderly. It seemed like kind of a career track for retired men. And they would be like the groundskeepers and generally security guards and just watch out for everyone at the building. So this one, his name was Muhammad, and he came out of nowhere. I remember him suddenly like teleporting there, being very tall. And you could tell he was one of those people that didn't like children. And I can't tell anymore, but I remember when I was a child, I could always tell who the adults were that weren't fond of children. And he was one of them. And he told us we were never, ever allowed in the garden. And so we left, and I was very upset. And we went upstairs to my apartment. And my friend said, I have an idea. Let's get revenge on your Boab with voodoo.
Oh, no.
And I didn't know what voodoo was. I mean, she didn't know what voodoo was either, really. But what she explained to me was that you make a doll that looks like the person, and then you poke it with something. So we didn't have anything to make a doll with, but I suggested we could make him with toothpicks. So we made a little toothpick person, and she said, well, I know what we can do. So she got the little toothpick person and she snapped off his arm. And it seemed kind of violent, but I was really committed at this point. It was like the point of no return. And she got the little toothpick person and she put it in a little container that my mom had on the coffee table, a little wooden box. And she said, now we just have to wait. So we waited and waited and nothing happened. And days went by. And as far as I could tell, nothing terrible had happened to him. I mean, I didn't actually expect his arm to break, but I figured there would be some kind of consequence of having barred me from this garden. But nothing happened. And eventually I decided I had to take revenge into my own hands. So I went up to the roof of the apartment building, and it was flat and you could walk around on there. And I looked over the edge and I could see the corrugated roof of his home, which was right next to the apartment complex. And I figured that if I dropped a rock on it, that would really startle him. And that would be my revenge. So I found a really big rock, probably about the size of my head. It was very heavy. And I threw it over the edge and it went straight through the roof. And I was, of course, horrified. And I ran down to my apartment complex as fast as I could, so no one would see me and think it was me. And ran into my apartment, and my mom was standing at the window washing dishes. And she turned and looked at me and she said, "What did you do?" And I had no idea how she knew. So I just straight up asked her, I was like, "How do you know that I did something?" And she said, I just saw something hurtle past the window right here. And I was obviously in big trouble. And a short time later, she came and told me that there were all kinds of terrible consequences to what I had done, that the rock had fallen actually through the top of the carport of the owners, and I'd actually been facing completely the wrong way. So I'm still not sure how that happened, because I have pretty good sense of direction, but I guess it was meant to be, and probably a good thing I did not destroy the roof or, bonk this poor man in the head. I really could have killed him. It was terrible. And instead, what had happened was they had gone through the carport and scratched up their BMW.
Mm.
So she told me I had to go down to the owner's apartment and apologize. And I'd never met them. We were pretty new to Cairo. And so I went down to meet my fate. And I knocked on her door, and she opened the door. It was the owner's wife that opened the door. And she listened as I gave my apology and explained everything. And I thought she was going to be really mad. But instead, she was very kind. And I swear she said, it wasn't your fault. She said, I was allowed to play in the garden whenever I wanted. She pulled out from, I don't know where, some tray of Turkish delights and started force feeding me these Turkish delights. And she really epitomized the hospitality that we found among all of the Egyptian people we ever met. They were all very kind, treated us like family. I remember one time we even walked by a wedding and they invited us in to join it. We were just random people walking by. And anyway, she was so kind, and that has always kind of stuck with me as an example of revenge not really being worthwhile, even though I never really got revenge. And it really is sad that thinking back, like I really didn't care about going in the garden as much as I cared about being told that I couldn't go in the garden. And it showed me what could be gained just with kindness and with just asking. And my mom's motto is my very favorite. She always says, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I could have just asked, but instead I had this really long roundabout way of figuring all that out, and a lifelong avoidance of revenge. And that's my story.
Yay.
That's a picture where I thought I looked very sweet and not mischievous, but I told I still look mischievous. I look mischievous in all my photos. I can't help it. I was just born that way.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for your story. I think that was, pretty wonderful what children can kind of get up to and learn when left to their own devices. But the show's still going, and I'd love to introduce the next one. She is so great because she has amazing stories, and she's got one of those stories for us tonight. So I'd love to introduce you to Ellen Sweets. She has covered fires and homicides and food as a reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Dallas Morning News, and the Denver Post. She is also the author of the culinary memoir, Stirring It Up with Molly Ivins. But tonight she's here for us to bring one of her stories, Seen Unseen.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the wonderful things about being a reporter is, especially if you're a features reporter, that's when you get to really do more long form stories and you get to go out and meet people. And when I found out that John Barrett was going to be in Dallas, this was when I was at the Morning News, I thought, oh man, this is the guy who wrote Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Now, if you've never read that book, shame on you. It's not too late. You can still get it. I think it's out in paperback. But I thought, man, I love that book so much. This guy is coming to town. I got first dibs on him. So off I went to the editor and I said, I really think that you should let me have this story. And she said, well, when do you want to interview him? And I said, well, I think, because I know how to get out of a day's work, I said, I think I should just meet up with him and trail him during the day and write the story about all the different people he met and the different things he did. And they said, what a good idea. So you really can fool some of the people some of the time. And I said, okay, off we go. And I neglected to notice that the first interview was at 6:30 in the morning. Now, that's usually when I'm going to bed. So it was a real problem. But I made it. I did it. We had a great time. And of course, I initially, I introduced myself to him and addressed him as Mr. Barrett. And by the time we got to the luncheon that he had been invited to town for, it was John and Ellen. There was no Ms. and no Mr. And we had a great time. I mean, it was just one interview after another. So after the lunch, I think it was a fundraiser for one of those fancy schools out east. It was Smith or Wellesley or Bryn Mawr, it doesn't matter, because the food was pretty good. And he hung out and signed a lot of books and sold a lot of books. And by the time that was over, he was so tired and I was exhausted, God knows. So we agreed that we would part company temporarily and he would go take a nap and I would go take a nap. And we would start off again in the evening where there was going to be a fancy reception in his honor from one of these fancy schools, the name of which I can't remember. And I thought, well, since I'm going to this fancy reception at this fancy house and this fancy inside Dallas town, Dallas has these little high dollar cities that are inside of Dallas. And I thought, I'm going to clean up real nice here. And I'm going to put on a little black dress and I'm put on some sensible but stylish shoes. And I'm going to go along and look smart with my little notebook. And so I did. And I got there early as I was supposed to. And I parked in front of the house and I started up the walk. And as I approached the front door, the door flew open and the person who opened it, whom I presume to be the lady of the house, excuse me, said, they're around the back. And she pointed to the walk that went around to the back of her house. And for a minute, I thought, what is she? Oh, I know who she thinks I am. And so I went around the back and I went into the kitchen. And I had been doing some food stories. So I'd gotten to know a few caterers. And this particular event was catered by someone I knew. So when I walked in the kitchen, they looked at me and said, Ellen, what are you doing in here? And I said, well, the lady told me to come around here. And she said, well, okay, because they had to get food ready. There was over by the wall, there was a step stool and a turquoise push button phone. This was in the 80s. And I just sat on the stool and I thought, well, sooner or later, the photographer's going to get here. Sooner or later, John Barrett's going to get here. And they're both going to say, where's Ellen? And sure enough, the doorbell rang. And I heard John has this wonderful resonant baritone voice. And I heard him say, Ellen's not here? And I sat there on the stool under the turquoise push button phone. And pretty soon the photographer said, well, this is really strange because she almost always gets here before the photographer. I think I'm going to call and see if anybody's heard from her. So there was a swinging door that led from the dining room where they were standing into the kitchen. And when they opened the door, there I sat under the turquoise push button phone. And they both said, "Why are you in the kitchen?" And I said, "Oh, hey guys, what's happening? Let's get to work." And we did. And I interviewed people and we took pictures, and there was a sort of handsome couple sitting by this incredible spread. I mean, there were crab claws and there was shrimp and there was that looked like a real pate. And I'm thinking, sure, we'll be glad when these people leave so I can get a little taste of that. But what we did was we took wonderful pictures of a handsome couple eating the food, but we didn't take a picture of the food. And then we took pictures of a couple of very smartly dressed women. Then we took some atmospheric pictures. And then we took a picture of the table showing the couple and the woman's back to us. So the whole evening, we did not take one picture of the hostess's face. So that when I wrote the story, I talked about the lovely house and the lovely little community. And I talked about the handsome couple at this wonderful spread. And I talked about the other interesting people. And I quoted some folks. And at the end of the evening, we said our goodbyes. I thanked the hostess, and the whole time she was so miserable. She just wanted to say something to me, but she didn't know what she was supposed to say. And I just pretended everything was A-okay. I'm happy. Yes, sir. I'm happy as a proverbial pig in shit. I'm having a good time. And the evening kind of wound down, and I took John back to his hotel, and we decided to have a little drink. And I decided also that I wouldn't say anything to him about there around the back until we were well away from the house. And he was livid. He was so angry. And I said, "John, you really have to lighten up, dude, because we run into these crazy scenarios all the time, and you can't get upset over stupid stuff." And he said, "Well, you're a lot calmer than I am." I said, "Oh, let's have another martini and forget about it." And that was sort of the end of our evening. It was altogether a perfect day. I got to meet an author whose book I truly loved. By the way, that book ended up being translated into 36 languages. And John and I stayed in touch. And there's a whole story behind that too, because he had about 30 rejection letters before it finally got published. I mean, really that many.
Wow.
In any case, John and I stayed in touch. We became friends, really. And we're still in touch. And every now and then, I remember the evening, the first time I went to New York and visited with him, and he had a little cocktail party for me. And I was introduced around, and I met people. And finally, somebody said, "Ellen." "Oh, you're Ellen. You're the one who," and I said, "Yeah, that's
So good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank
Like,
It
you.
was fun.
we were telling you earlier that I would totally be completely happy with just a Ellen story time.
Yes.
And that unfortunately is our show for tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. I would love to thank our storytellers for sharing their time and parts of their lives with us. Simply Courtney, Lottie Laura Galan Wells, and Ellen Sweets. Thank you so much for coming to the Testify stage. We here at Testify love hearing stories from people, brave, true tales that people kind of trust us with. And on that note, we love to hear from you. And if you have a story you'd love to tell, feel free to go to testifyatx.com. We have themes for the year, and I think we'll be developing more as we kind of adjust to this new format. So make sure you keep up with us here on Facebook or on Testify ATX. Check us out at our website. Sign up for our newsletter. We do like storytelling workshops. You can learn how to do exactly what you saw tonight. And when we get back to, hopefully when we get back to eventually the Spider House Ballroom stage, we'd love to welcome you there and kind of let you tell us your story. So thank you so much for being a part of our night. Thank you again to our Testify producers, Kate Caldwell, Lottie, Paul Normandin, and thank you again to our storytellers. And yes, thank you for being here. I'm Angela Maldonado, and I hope to see you at our next Testify show at the last Thursday of next month, July. The theme and how to be involved, those details will come out soon. So thanks again.
Bye.
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 Good night.
Thank you,
Good
Angela.
night.
Thank